Okay, welcome. And I am recording now, hopefully. But today is going to be a pretty good lesson. All right, because today we're talking about your shadow. Okay, so that's the dark part of yourself you don't like to look at. For me, I like to look at it. It's my entire face. It's all of me. I like looking at my darkness. So here, this will be fun for you. Anyway, bad jokes aside, basically, if you guys don't know, the entire concept of what your shadow is that throughout your life you have these experiences, right? And when you have these experiences, which are the fundamental kind of building block of the story you tell yourself in your head, because if you're a writer or any type of creative, you have some music, some story, you have some art you want to get out. You draw on that art because it's a mirror of life, a mirror of your reality. But when you see things you don't like in your reality, you then begin to repress that because you're like, oh, I don't like that for whatever reason. And eventually, because the thing we naturally want to share is our art, we don't like what we're seeing in life more and more and more and more until naturally we begin to associate the darkness and the things that we don't like about life in our art. And so naturally we stop sharing, right? And so typically what's happened is there's ugly parts of yourself that you see in your art, that you see in your life. And subconsciously, you've blocked yourself from writing, you've blocked yourself from making music because there's parts of yourself you don't like. That's really what's core at the core going. That's what's going on. And so the idea is we now need to start a process of first identifying what those things are, accepting them, and then moving to a place where we can actually work with them to create our art. Now you might say, like, what do you mean? Like, I've completely accepted myself. I love myself. Really? Well, then you wouldn't have clicked on this video. You wouldn't be wondering, how can I break through and make more art? You would just be writing, right? You would be making music. You would just be doing that thing. You wouldn't be looking at ways to do it or procrastinating, listening to some stranger on YouTube about it. But here we are. So let's see what the stranger can tell you. Now, essentially, once you have these experiences, you have this emotions that come from those experiences. When you repress those emotions and you push them down and you don't process them, it's almost um, like getting kind of like dirty, bad food or whatever. Instead of throwing it out or kind of processing, taking what you need and doing what you like, eating it or getting rid of the rest, you just kind of stuff it in the back and then it rots and decays and kind of creates a smell and festers. And then you can either face it and take care of it and clean up the mess, or you can continue to shove more and more stuff back there. It begins to rot and then it creates like this absolute disaster of a place that you just avoid. And then eventually that stench ruins the entire place, right? Everyone can smell it for miles because it's just sitting there because someone won't address it. That's what happens to dark parts of our personality. This is why we have mental health issues. This is why we get depressed. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to be responsible or say this or that and the third, but I can say affirmatively with a level of authority that when you face these shadows, the symptoms of this shadow, recurring sicknesses, procrastination, depression, these things typically vanish because they are no longer needed to manifest, because all your body is trying to do and through your life is trying to show you what these shadows are, these rejected parts of yourself, so that you can eventually face them. So today we're going to face them and we're going to talk about what some of the different faces of those shadows can look like, identify whatever shadow it is that you're dealing with in your own life, and then talk about ways we can face that so that eventually the art you want to do, the music you want to create, the book you want to write, which everybody should write a book, I believe. And if you're interested in that, look at my Skool group down below and apply to work with me if you're a 6 to 7 figure entrepreneur or high figure earner and you want to learn how to write better and make a book that has authentic, sustainable impact in the world, or just create a business, right? I also do stuff outside of creative stuff, but that's my big focus right now. Anyway, so let's talk about your shadow, right? Now, basically, you can break most shadows and struggles, people come down to 7 primary forces in their life. And most people are going to be dealing with the first one, right? Very few people ever get past number 3, right? Which is right here. We're going to go through all of them because, we like to be comprehensive on this channel. But the reality is that probably in the first 20 minutes of this video, you're not really going to need much more than that, because anything else is just information and procrastination. But here, let's talk about the very first aspect, primordial force, we need to encounter. I'm going to use a different marker so that we know what has been added. So we're going to talk about joy and sloth. Now, I'm using the framework of the 7 deadly sins because I like it. It's a nice little framework. But basically, when you're struggling with sloth, AE, procrastination, laziness, don't want to do it, it's usually coming from this aspect that you've somehow denied joy in your life. Now, the shadow of joy comes from there's something that you enjoy or that you like doing, which you don't feel slothful about, but you're repressing that. And what's interesting is that oftentimes people, for instance, will look at different aspects. So for instance, a really, really common shadow, for instance, is like sexual appetite. That's a really, really common one, right? So a lot of people will think, well, you have like sexual appetite, that's down here, and lust, right? Like that's lust, right? Lust is sex, right? That's not really what lust is about. That's not what the sin of lust is about. But it's often demonstrated through sex because it's about power and dominion, right? But say, for instance, you really, really like sex. Let's just say you're someone who likes sex for some reason, right? But you grew up in like a religious background. And so you've repressed this urge for it consistently, right? Because this is an activity, say you want to enjoy, you kind of do it, but you don't have ways to do it. So typically what will happen is that'll manifest through wanting to probably read a lot of romantic or like erotica, these types of things. You see a lot of women who are like this. They'll read like all this erotica, or they'll read like all these romance novels, and it's just because they find a lot of joy in this, right? But then they're not ever actually quite able to step in to their own capacity to really explore this stuff. I've seen this with some of my clients, and a lot of this times they'll feel like, oh, I'm too lazy, I can't do it, because they haven't accepted the fact that they, for instance, just enjoy having sex, right? Which is a perfectly natural human function, right? But if you come from a place where it was like, sex is bad, you're evil, you shouldn't want to do that, naturally, you're going to repress that, and you're going to put that into this sort of shadow closet, and it's just going to rot there and fester. And then when you try to draw from that for inspiration, well, you can't, because it's just a bunch of rotten meat in the back that you need to kind of clear out. And so naturally, that's procrastination is coming from, I don't want to engage in this thing for whatever reason. And so you have to face that. This is a really clear example. And I'm going to talk to you guys about that is not lust, which is why I use that example. But I think there's a lot of men as well. For instance, there might be men who like playing video games. They'll be like, oh, I'm not allowed to play video games because I have to do this thing first. And so you get in this habit of always working, always putting off or doing the thing in order to earn the thing. Like, I'm not allowed to write until I do this, or I'm not allowed to do this until I do that. You create all these conditions of your joy. Now, the difficulty is that joy is literally the foundational primordial force, right? If you don't have joy, everything else is, you're just scraping bedrock. You don't have a foundation to build anything on if you were not experiencing joy, at least in a modicum way. So most people have their joy stripped from them from duty, obligations, being trapped in society. And that's like the thing they try to kill in you, because if they can kill your joy, and I say they like the enemy, but the reality is there's no enemies. Just if you lose your joy, everything else crumbles apart. Then you're too lazy to do the things you want to do. You do the things you have to do. You go to work, you pay the bills, you do the mortgage, but you don't actually enjoy anything. And everything else, you watch hours and hours and hours of social media, but you can't sit in front of the computer for 10 minutes and write because you're not experiencing any real joy. And that's usually like the big part of it. So if you guys want to talk about that, it's just finding things that you actually enjoy and committing to doing those things first and leaning into them enough where, you're actually able to sit down and enjoy them. And if you want to know the difference between something you actually enjoy versus something you feel like you're addicted to or using to escape the pain of it, we'll continue further, because that actually goes into the next step, which is faith and envy. So if something is something you truly enjoy and it's something that's actually really important to you, the biggest thing you're going to notice is that typically there's a result or something you're hoping with that. And sometimes you just enjoy the process with it. But that means you have to have enough faith and trust in that process. So usually 80% of people struggle with joy and trust. If we can work through that, that's like 80% of most people's blocks. They don't even get to the place of here because it's usually just trust issues and the inability to really like properly acknowledge what it is you want to do and why you want to do it without a sense of judgment or a sense of duty or obligation getting in the way, right? And so having that level of trust, frankly, just in yourself and in whatever you want to do, that you'll be safe, that whatever you're doing is not evil, that's typically the big part of it. Because most of the time people feel like if I do this thing or if I enjoy it, I'm going to be punished from on high or something bad will happen. They don't trust the process of their own enjoyment. They don't trust that by playing the game. They don't trust by having the sex or whatever, that good things will come of it. And so that's what creates the issues, right? And then through that repression, typically, the shadow comes and finds different ways to come out, usually through like insane addiction, like to like pornography. For like a good example is like what happens when you repress your shadow is like, so Utah is a state in the United States where there's a large religious population, right? And because of that religious population, they put off abstinence, sex till marriage, right? That state also happens to be the highest rate of pornography users in the United States, right? That was a study that was done in the early 2000s. It might not be super relevant now. It's probably changed a lot since then. But this is an example of what happens when you repress your natural urges, right? Obviously, you have to find healthy ways to just go about that. We're not talking about what that means necessarily here, what's healthy and unhealthy. We're just kind of identifying what the root cause is, right? Because the root cause for whatever's blocking your writing, your creativity, is that fundamentally, you're repressing this shadow. And if you repress that shadow, it's going to find subversive ways to come out. And now if you're lucky, like an Ernest Hemingway or like a Stephen King, your subversive shadow or self-loathing will come up through your writing, and that will make you rich and famous, right? But then eventually, in order to get to a place where you can steadily enjoy it and come to a place of clarity, you're going to have to overcome those demons, right? I think this is the difference between someone like Stephen King versus like a George R. R. Martin. Because once there's this level of shadow, this thing that's been satisfied, the drive is not ultimately there. Because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that drives us to do these things, right? And this is where uncovering your joy is really, really important. Because there's a lot of people, for instance, that think they want to write or that they want to do music, but when they really step into it and they really pay attention to their joy, they're realizing they're just using that as an outlet for something else that's being unmet. And typically when that need is met, the drive for this creative expression goes away. I can't tell you how many writers or people like I've had as clients who said they wanted to write a book or they wanted to have this level of career. And then when they actually started doing it, we just came to find out that it was a bypass of something else that they actually wanted. And that once they figured out what that actual thing was, you found out that they didn't actually want to write or do anything like that. Which wouldn't be surprised if that's like 80% of you, because most people who say they want to write don't really want to write, even though you should. I think everybody should write a book, at least one, because it really helps you understand this process of being and telling a story. Now, basically, if you've been able to figure out what it is you enjoy and you've worked through your trust issues, that's like 80% of you. So if you're like, well, okay, I figured out the trust so what do we do here? Skip to like near the end of the video, right? I'll put the time marker in or whatever. But basically you don't really need to hear it. Listen to the rest of this, but really you just need the exercise at the end of the video that I'm going to talk about, which is basically 6 basic steps. Actually, I'll just talk about it right now and then we'll talk about it. Because basically you need to observe and name whatever it is you're going through. So the big part of when the shadow is going to come up is when you have a trigger. When something comes up that you get really annoyed by. So if there is something being repressed, it's going to find its ways to come out. So for instance, you're like, oh, I just want to have sex or whatever. When people start talking liberally about sex, or people start talking about their sex lives or things like that, and you start getting really, really triggered and you start having, that means there's something there. There's something there. So now you need to observe, take a step back. And like the author, being your inner author, which we'll talk about join my course if you want to learn more about that. Being your inner author, take a step back, and instead of seeing and experiencing the emotion fully as the I am, take a step back and see it as a character. That this character, are experiencing this emotion or this trigger. What is going on there? And then name it. I am feeling angry. I am feeling frustrated. Goes to, she is feeling frustrated. He is feeling angry because this character said this to him or to her. And that is why she or he is thinking this. And then they are thinking X, O, whatever. And then just take a step back and observe that feeling. Get in a private place, sit with the moment, sit with the emotion, and sit. What is that character experiencing? Then once you know what that character is experiencing and what they're going through, now you can objectively identify what it is they're going through, whether it's anger, frustrations, repression, whatever. Then once you can name it honestly, be like, I'm upset, but Sally and Jim are so happy about their sex life. Well, I feel fat and ugly, or something like that. But it's like, okay, she's sad that Sally and Jim are so happy and she feels fat and ugly, or whatever, right? Then just, you observe it, you name it, and then you accept it. You observe that this character, let's call her name Chelsea. Chelsea feels fat and ugly and is jealous of, or envious rather, of Liz and Jim, of Sally and Jim banging it out. And she's just lonely, fat, and frustrated. All right? She feels that way. Now she can accept it. She can accept it, and that's the second step, right? So actually, I wrote this stuff right here, so I'll put this down for you guys, right? So now that she can accept it, she accepts it totally without judgment. So she's not judging it and being like, I'm fat and ugly and I hate myself. Like, don't go down that spiral. Because remember, we're just talking about a character in a story now. That's all we're doing. We're talking about a character in a story. And then we accept how they feel. And then in understanding, okay, this character in this story is going through this storyline, identify the part of you, the character that is feeling that. Well, did that start when she was 14 maybe, and she liked another boy, but she felt like she wasn't able to show interest in him, and because of religious or whatever story is going on there. It doesn't really matter what the story is, to be honest, right? It just matters that you identify and speak to the part of you that is having that trigger and recognize it as, this is a part of me, but it's a part. It's not me. It's a part. It's not me, right? You have to create that sense of dissociation. If you're not able to do that, go back to this step. You have to be able to step back from these emotional triggers. And if you're like, well, it's them, and you're just, okay, then you're in victim lame mode, and you're just like, you're in loser spiral. You're in the loser spiral. If you're not able to step far enough out of your own emotion, you're in what I call the loser doom spiral. And that's low consciousness. Like, you got to be able to step back from that. You're like, well, this triggers me and makes me so upset. Yeah, it's loser shit. It's okay. It's okay to be a loser. Just accept it, observe and name it, recognize that you are not the loser, and move back. So some people might now just be like, oh my God, he's such an asshole on the screen. It's like, you're literally watching this video. It's not me that's the asshole. You're the asshole for judging a part of yourself. Identify what part of that is. Step back and observe it. And once you can identify what that part is, I want you to vent and allow that part to say whatever it needs to say. You just vent. It's just like, man, Jim and Sally, they're just so fat, and I hate them because I'm fat, and I'm just so repressed, and I hate my church, and whatever's going on, whatever crazy stuff you need to say. It doesn't matter. There's no judgment here. You're like, I just want them to burn, and I'd like to slice their heads, whatever crazy stuff you want to say. Literally, no judgment. If you need to vent, say it out loud. I have an exercise where you literally do this. You write this down from these steps. You observe what you're feeling. You name it. You accept it wholeheartedly. You write out that part of acceptance. You identify the part of you that's feeling it. My inner child, my inner writer, my inner woman that just wants to be beautiful. Whatever, our fictional, I can't even remember what her name was. Kimberly, whatever her name is, right? Chelsea, whatever Chelsea's feeling. Then Chelsea's just going to vent. She's going to be like, I feel so ugly. Nobody loves me. My dad didn't hug me enough. Whatever's going on in her story. You know what I mean? She's like, oh, it was terrible. I wasn't loved. I wasn't touched. I just want to feel good. Right? She's just going to go off and you're just going to write whatever crazy stuff you need to down. Guys, I'm telling you, This is an awesome exercise. It's really funny. And, you just, you let it out. Just be like, Chelsea, oh, I'm dying. Poor Chelsea. She just wants to be touched. Okay. And then after that, when Chelsea's gotten everything she needs out, the part of you that is observing, the you that is behind all the characters, all the masks, all the identity, you're going to now reassure Chelsea. You're going to tell Chelsea, hey, babe, you know what? Yeah, you're a little chunky. Yeah, you're a little thick. But you know what? There's dudes out there who find you sexy. And you know what? There's gyms. There's gym memberships. There's nothing you can't do, babe. You got this, girl. You're just going to reassure the shit out of her. You're going to make her feel like $1,000,000 because Chelsea is worthy of love. And nothing that happened to her in high school when that boy didn't look at her or anything happened will ever change that, because she will always be worthy of love. You will always be worthy of love. And that's what you need to do. You need to reassure. And then to make sure that these things don't happen. So you're like, oh, but I have this repressed sexuality. Nobody loves me. But my church thinks that. Well, you need to say, okay, well, I'm not a member of that church anymore, or I'm grown and this trauma didn't happen to me, or whatever boundaries, whatever reallocation of energy, whatever got in the way that the original trauma, you're going to rewrite the story in such a way that it empowers Chelsea's part, whatever part. So if it was, for instance, like, I actually have a client like this, so maybe I shouldn't laugh so much about this, but like, so she had some stuff happen to her when she was a kid from her uncle or whatever, right? And so what happened is, in order to turn that story into a empowerment, she had to write the story in such a way where she thought, well, now I'll be able to tell people about it. And she was eventually actually able to forgive that uncle. And they actually still had a relationship with the family and everything. And she was able to work it out. So she talked about her ability to have grace and to learn love and forgiveness. And then she was able to restructure that whole story. And then, eventually, she's cool having these types of experiences. And then, boom, the joy is unlocked. And then suddenly all the inspiration, all the energy that was holding on, trying to not smell that rotting decay, you just cleaned it out and threw it away. So now all that extra energy is freed up to be creative. And that's what she was able to do. And so that's basically the process, right? Now we'll go through and talk about the other sort of primordial forces, but I just want that there because chances are that's like 85% of you. 85% of you, that's where you're stuck. You're just stuck on figuring out your joy or figuring out your trust issues, and that same process is going to work for any of these, but it's really about identifying where your block is, right? So it's usually joy, it's usually trust for like 80% of people. That's what it is, right? So yeah, good luck. Thanks. Take care. Like and subscribe. But if you're still here because you want to hear their other ones, or, maybe you're having a more advanced block, maybe you're writing and you're making progress, but you're not able to be steady, or there's other things that are coming up, let's talk about it. And so now, let's say, for instance, you're in a very consumer mode, right? We're going to talk about gluttony, which is basically the opposite of sovereignty. I use a lot of religious wording just because I think there's a lot of people I've served and that this resonates with a lot of them. But just this idea of gluttony is this like unending consumer, right? This overthinking. It's this sense of just not having enough, not being enough, right? Not having enough. And that's usually comes from a lack of sovereignty. Now, what sovereignty is basically having defined boundaries and a strong sense of identity. This means at some point you haven't really been able to own yourself, right? That means either your life, all the decisions you've made, everything you're doing is consecrated or done to somebody else. So maybe you do have joy. You see a lot of mothers like this. So I worked with a lot of my clients are like housewives and stuff like that. And a lot of them struggle with this one because they've spent a lot of time like giving their life over to other people, like their children, their parents, their church, their husband. They just spend all their time giving themselves over. So they're just caught up in this cycle of feeling all they can do then is just consume, right? Because the idea of gluttony is actually this idea that, so food is supposed to have a process, and part of the food process is actually supposed to be creating it. When you move to just the consumption part of gluttony, you actually miss the most important part of it, which is being part of the creation process in the food. So a good example of gluttony. Gluttony is just eating the apple. Like, apple, delicious. You throw it out and that's it. That's gluttony. Um, my camera went off on the webcam, but no big deal. So that's gluttony. You're like, I just eat, delicious, right? And then you just throw it out, and then it's whatever. But the higher part of that actual consumption is you see the apple go in the ground. You see the tree rose up. You water it every day. You take care of it. You protect it from the wind. You grab and then when the apples come on the tree, you pick the apples. You bundle them together. You find the ones that work, that are nice. And then the ones that aren't, you kind of throw them in the grass or give them to the pigs or whatever. You take that in. You wash it. Then you eat it. And then obviously the other part of the process you want to go to then, it comes out the other end, and you use that fertilizer to throw on the tree. And then the cycle of life continues. That's full processing. That's what it means to fully process something. That is sovereignty. The idea of being able to be part of a process and understand your role in it and see it all the way from beginning to end, understanding where I contribute, where I receive, where I step in the world. Being a sovereign is like being a king, a kingdom. A kingdom doesn't operate independent of natural law. It works in conjunction with natural law. So when you're able to see yourself in conjunction with natural law, you're able to see where I fit in the environment and I'm making contributions, then you have a sense of sovereignty. But if you've never stepped into the full process of that and you've just constantly either received your whole life, there's some people where all they've been given is just a silver spoon their entire lives. And they've been helped with every single little thing. And they've always had something there for them. And they've never been able to contribute. That also is a sovereignty block. They just become consumers, right? And so this is where a lot of people, I would say probably like that last 10, 15% of really, really hyper-privileged people, if you're like, man, I'm privileged, I'm a bum, and I just don't struggle with anything, but that's my struggles. I don't struggle with everything. Your struggle is with sovereignty. You haven't found a way to get over your consumptive habit because you've just received everything your whole life. You never had to pick the apples. You never had to kill the cow. You never had to, dig up the potato. You just always had it served to you on a plate. You never saw the process from beginning to end. And now I'm not saying you do this with your food, but the reason it's important to learn how to do that is because these processes, if you want to learn how to write, if you want to learn how to be good at piano, if you want to learn how to be good at a sport, you cannot shortcut that process. You have to learn every single skill that is absolutely necessary. Oh, what the heck? My camera keeps having issues on my computer over here. And I guess we'll just hoping that I guess we'll just have to hope that the phone one doesn't balance out or whatever. That is so annoying. So that is what it is. Sovereignty is basically knowing this is where I sit in this whole process, and I'm not just a privileged loser, who's not doing anything about it, but I'm actually contributing. And when you feel like you're a part of that process and you're actual big contributing factor, now you're sovereign, and now you're stepping into that process, and that is how you get over that block, right? And so oftentimes when you feel a lack of sovereignty and you're just you're just consuming the sorry, I'm gonna focus up. That how you get over that is, again, acknowledging that sense of powerlessness, acknowledging that sense of like, man, I've just been a spoiled I've been a spoiled loser my whole life, and I just suck, right? Or whatever is going on in your head. And then committing to that change, and then saying, yeah, I'm not going to be a lazy bum. I'm not going to be a loser. I don't understand the full process. Because the thing is, sometimes if you've never learned how to struggle, you've never learned how to go through anything difficult because you've never seen the full process of anything, you've just gotten the end result of it. Yeah, you don't know how to learn. You don't know how to struggle. You don't know how to grow because you've just been given it your whole life. Right? And so this is where a lot of consumers, and honestly, to be stuck at sovereignty it's a block of privilege, because most people, when they work through the first two, joy and faith, they've struggled enough that they're usually blast right through the last few. But sovereignty is a very sophisticated one because you have to learn to really contribute. This is where having a strength of will, knowing where my will is, knowing where I begin and another person ends, that's important. And so a lot of this is just understanding and knowing where are my boundaries, what's important to me, and really making decisions for yourself. If you notice that you have like a big, like a big temper. That's going to be a big example of like you're starting to step into like some gluttony and some sovereignty there. But temper's actually more for here. We'll get down to that wrath, but let's keep going. Anyway, so after you know how to contribute or whatever, you're going to now learn grace. Now, grace is basically learning, I suck, I'm allowed to make mistakes, and I'm just going to have to learn and figure this out, right? Because this is where you release the judgment. This is the acceptance, like learning to accept that part of the shadow, right? When you are able to step into grace, you're basically beating lust. And now what lust is what happens is when that corrupted feeling of sovereignty has not been accounted for. And so it's the structural foundation for seeking power through something. Usually, like when we talk about lust, people think, oh, it's just an uncontrollable sexual urge. But really what it is, when you talk about the biblical sense and the way lust is used, it's talking about this insatiable hunger for like a lust for power, or like an endless ambition, or like this struggling for will. It's this sense of wanting and having to prove yourself, and then finding all these ways, these games of domination, these ways of manipulation to get what you want, because you're not able to honestly engage with the process. You're always having to shortcut or manipulate it. And oftentimes when sexual lust is talked about, when people talk about it, it's usually in the sense of prostitution. Prostitution is the idea of like, I pay someone, I have sex with them, but then I don't have to engage in the process of like, actually of what sex means, right? I don't have to get to know them, talk to them. I don't have to engage in that because yeah, you're just getting the end result. You're getting the slam bam thank you ma'am, but you don't get any of the other parts of it. That's why sex is often used as the most powerful example of lust, because it's people striving for the end result but absolutely shortcutting the process, right? And that's what you see like in this modern day. And so a lot of people get caught up here in grace and lust, but oftentimes it's because they lack joy in their lives or whatever, right? Again, like lust is not exclusively about sex. Like you really need to cut that association in your head, right? So then the last one, well, second to last, no, actually we got three more, so we're not done here yet. So after that we have wrath and then surrender. So wrath obviously is anger, right? But it's anger when you're right. It's anger knowing that I was right, I did the right thing, this was right, this was wrong, justice, I want justice. This urge for justice. You see a lot of this in today's age where people just want justice and it's got to happen their way. And if it doesn't happen, it's because it's wrong and everyone's wrong. And it's just judgment, 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 judgment. Because obviously grace has not been integrated. We do not know how to stabilize at this level. We have lots of energy. And your wrath is going to be tested when you are correct. Absolutely. That is when your wrath is going to be tested. It is when the guy did steal from you and you have the right to chop his hand off. Wrath is when your wife does cheat on you and you're like, she's evil, da 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 da. So many people got caught up down this rabbit hole. It's insane, right? Because the world justifies it. The world says, you're right. You should be wrathful. You should be righteous, right? But that will block your creative flow. It will block your ability to step in and manifest reality, because rather than learning how to surrender and go with the flow and choosing peace, you have now chosen righteousness. You've chosen being right and correct. This is where you see this in a lot of couples where they'll always use this example of like, oh man, she's just right, and just pretend she's right or whatever. And like a lot of men, this is where the masculine and feminine are great, where you just have to learn to choose peace. This is where a lot of guys don't realize this is what your woman's trying to test in you. She's trying to test your ability to flow and surrender, right? Not to just be like naggy and mean, but she's like, is he stable enough in who he is that he doesn't have to be right? Is he able to choose that peace? Are you able to choose that surrender? Because this primordial force, remember, it's not about your emotions. It's about a character trait. Are you solid enough in your own peace, in your own grace, your own sovereignty? Do you have enough faith? Are you joyful enough in your own life that you don't have to be right? That you don't have to find or seek justice? Because then that saves up your energy to go into the things that matter. And that means this masculine will is then able to flow, right? And so this is the real final, like, masculine edge. Like, we can talk about these being feminine, masculine, or whatever, but when we're able to cross this threshold, you now have a tremendous amount of power. If you're here, you are absolutely able to write. You are absolutely able to write. You're able to get whatever you need to done. You're able to move into it. Even if you're in here, right? Most people won't ever get here, but like, if you're able to be in here, you're usually writing at some level. You're having some struggles, maybe you're starting, stopping, but you're not blocked fully here. In order to get to a place where you're stabilized now and you're just able to creatively flow or whatever, you have to master these last two primordial forces. And there is no shortcuts, because this last one is gratitude. Well, second to last, penultimate, is gratitude versus greed. Greed is pretty simple. It's taking more than you need, right? I need this, I want this, da 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 da. It's always thinking about what you want and never having, right? Because greed is always putting you in a place of wanting more. And when you say want, you're basically telling the universe, which is a mirror of you, that you don't have something. And when you don't have something, that is given onto you. The mindset you approach life with, you're just going to see more of that given to you. So if you're always approaching life from this place of I don't have, life is always going to continue to give you more reasons of why you don't have. But if you say that I have, and I'm grateful for what I have, life gives you more of that. It gives you more things that you have. So it's learning to be grateful. So when you're able to write, when you're writing, are you focusing on the fact that you have a laptop and that you have a story idea and that you have characters and that you're able to suck, that you're able to work through grace, that you're able to learn how to grow, and that you've developed enough sovereignty to figure out how to put a book together and you have the opportunity? Or are you just seeing all the mistakes? Are you just seeing everything that's not working? Are you coming from this place of greed, this I should be better? Greed is really just perfectionism on like hyper. It takes the mask of perfectionism, right? But perfectionism also comes up here as sloth and envy. Perfectionism is a really like powerful trait. Well, we can talk about specific examples of shadows later in another video, but I'm really just getting down to these core character traits. Because when you don't have a solid handle on greed, man, the difficulty is you're going to have power. You're going to be able to create. You're going to be able to build. You're going to be able to make things happen. But it's never going to quite work. You're going to have a marriage that you're going to be with the girl, but oh man, you just don't quite like her. Or you got the job, but you're not just quite happy. It's this. Too much greed, not enough gratitude. And that's usually happening because one of these or all of these are imbalanced at some level. You haven't mastered joy, faith, sovereignty, grace, surrender. You have not mastered one of these. So this is making gratitude really, really hard. So usually once you get up here, if you're noticing that I just get everything I want, I'm able to create, I'm able to build, I'm able to grow, but it never feels quite good enough, at some point along the way, you forgot one of these, or you're just struggling with gratitude, my guy, my lady. You're just struggling with gratitude, and you need to be grateful. You need to show up, and you need to recognize what it is you have. If you're watching this video, you have a lot, trust me. You have more than kings and queens and some of the most powerful people of the past would have dreamed of. If you're able to watch me on a little camera or wherever the heck you are, if you're able to watch me, you have something that a lot of people for a lot of history did not have. So remember that. And so, finally, but last, but certainly not least, we have pride and truth. Now, pride is very interesting. We have a lot of greed, or you're able to win, because right now at this point, if you've gotten to this point where pride is becoming a big issue for you, you've won. You're kind of winning, man. But now you're going to start thinking you're different, it's better than other people, which intersects with the truth. And the truth of the self, the truth of the matter is that everyone and everything is connected. Everything is one. And until you master that, you will not be able to step into the last force at the bottom, which is the truth, which is love, which is loving what you do, loving your life, loving everything that's going on. Because that shadow of pride of, man, I'm better than this guy, or these people don't quite get it, or just always comparing yourself, especially when you start having a lot more than other people, you start seeing where other people fall short. You start seeing what they don't have, right? You start recognizing, man, I'm better than all these people. So once again, this is why the next part I say gratitude. The way around that is service. If you focus on service And you focus on serving people with what you do. Focus people on serving people with your writing. Think about your readers and not so much about you. Think about who are your audiences. Think about your customers if you're a business owner. When you focus on that service rather than just trying to get and trying to have more, then the energy flows and you start being able to see how everyone and everything is connected. And then you're able to move and conquer your own pride. And then when you're able to conquer your own pride, you see yourself for who you are. And you realize that everyone and everything is love, and that your life, that all the people around you, even the ones you don't like, they're all just manifestations of you in different parts. And that everyone and everything is connected. And that life is this beautiful interconnected web of beautifulness. And it's just amazing. But you're never going to see that if you're always repressing your shadow. So there's all the primordial forces. That's how you release them and get them over. Remember, observe and name whatever it is you're going through, right? So whenever you're having a trigger, whenever you're feeling like, not positive, not getting high vibes, identify which primordial force are you struggling to hold on to? Which sin are you struggling with? Observe it and name it. And feel that. Feel it. Don't deny it. Accept it without judgment. Don't point at it, call it evil. Don't try to repress it. Accept it. Identify the part of you. I don't know if you guys notice it. These steps also correspond with each of the primordial forces. So you're kind of going through and applying each of them as you go through it. So you identify the part of you. This is sovereignty, right? Figuring out which part of you is contributing to that whole process. Vent. That's grace. Giving yourself the space to say whatever it is you need to say. Surrender. Reassurance, right? And then restructure, recommit, service. How are you going to serve? How are you going to create boundaries? How are you going to build the thing? And then after that, we can put a nice little step. Live your best life. Oh, yeah. Live your best life. Step number 7. Just love it, baby. Because now you've broken through the shadows. Remember, life isn't about just releasing darkness all day, every day. If you get good enough where you haven't had this repressed stuff, it'll come and go, right? But life's easy, man. Life's easy when you let it be. Anyway, stay happy, stay healthy. Let it be.